the play on the word Richard is the word Dick, right? Your name's Richard, you're also known as Dick. And there's a Dick inside every agency that thinks that he or she knows how to run your agency better than you.
So welcome to another episode of Recruiting Alchemy with me, Andy Simpson. I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, somebody who I met for the first time 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Having never crossed paths before.
Bizarrely.
Strangely, really,
Definitely.
for two people who've been floating around for a long time.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur, incredibly successful recruitment leader, exited more than once, I'm going to say, at least once.
I didn't think you were talking about me then for a minute. Yeah. No, I've exited mine once, but I've executed 3 deals.
Amazing. So looking forward to learning all about that. But most importantly, people know you from your mad vlogs on LinkedIn with you and your American colleague, Matt. The content's great, by the way. I love it.
Thank you.
And I think it's been really fresh and refreshing to see that online. And I think I'd love to hear about how you got there, and we'll get to that point. But as our listeners know by now, every show begins with what we call the 2 beginnings. So I guess beginning number 1 is, who is Simon Brown?
I obviously did a little bit of prep in advance of coming on. I was a little bit nervous about this.
This bit. Is this where we find out you've done time and all that?
That'd be easy.
So take us back to the very, I'm gonna gamble and say the northwest of England.
Yeah, and if we'd have met, 10, 15 years ago, then like this microphone would be covered in a bit more spit and a bit more of my sort of pronunciation of words. I'm from Liverpool originally, and that's where I sort of grew up, and we moved around quite a bit, but essentially in and around the greater Liverpool area, and I stayed there really till I went to uni, and I wasn't going to go to uni. But a very long story short, I've been selling since I was 12, really. Right. We lived on an estate, and I sort of often tell this story, but we lived on an estate, and it was total estate living, and I loved it. So I was selling door to door, can I wash your car, can I do this? Odd jobs here and there to make extra money, right?
Yeah, ice cream money,
Match
magazine, shoot,
10 Lambert and Butler, all those things really, all the things that you do, but I absolutely loved it. And at the bottom of our estate was an industrial estate, and we used to go and like explore around there, and like boys do and did back then. We were allowed to play out and stuff differently. Anyway, at the top end of the estate was Turtle Wax, and Turtle Wax used to have the back of the factory. They used to have a big skip that they dumped all of their sort of misused and like things that they couldn't sell. And we would go down there, and me and my best mate Andy, and we would jump in, and we would pull out everything that we could. There was nothing wrong with it. It's just they couldn't sell it in a shop, right? We would bring it out, and we would take it back to Andy's house, and we'd clean it up, and we would knock door to door selling Turtle Wax. At a time when Turtle Wax used to cost a fortune, it was a brand new brand.
What is Turtle Wax?
Andy.
Am I showing my age?
You're in the right age range, but you've obviously never cleaned your own car. So Turtle Wax is, it was the first big brand that came in, to waxing, cleaning your own cars. Remember, there was a time we didn't really clean our cars like we do now. We didn't put tyre cleaner on and all that stuff. And they sold everything from black tyre paint but it was high end and it was expensive.
Right.
We would go door to door, knock it out for £1.
Right.
And I'd sort of been selling since then, really. Went to college, had a great time at college. No one in our family had been to uni, didn't really want to go to uni. We couldn't afford it anyway. So essentially I said to my mum, I'm going to go and get a job and not go to uni. And what I said is I'm going to take a year out and I'm going to get a job. And Wall's Ice Cream had just opened near us, and they'd opened a new sales centre. So I walked in. My first experience of a recruitment agency, because it was Blue Arrow who placed me there on a temp to perm.
Right.
And I went in 18, and it was 22 women and 2 fellas, and we were a brand new Wall's Ice Cream sales centre opened, and when you walked in, you had 2 weeks worth of training, and at the end of 2 weeks you put your hand in a basket and you pulled out your location where you were going to sell ice cream for the next 12 months. So the woman, I can remember it clear as day, called Helen, put her hand in before me, and she pulls out Brighton, and she's like, yes.
And this is in Liverpool?
This is in Liverpool, yeah. This is actually in Southport.
Right.
So this was I used to drive there every day, loved it. And I put my hand in and I got East Glasgow. Like, I mean, who even knew that Glasgow, needed splitting up into all these sections? East Glasgow to sell ice cream. And my accent then was really strong. And it was a real strong Glaswegian Indian contingent that you had to sell to.
Right.
And it was like a baptism of sales fire every week. Do you want any twisters? And it's like, Simon, it's like raining outside. And I'm like, just take a box of twisters. So I did that for a year.
So you went to Glasgow. Did you drive?
No, it was all phone. No, that was all phone.
On the phone.
That was all phone based. No cadence, no source whale, no automation, no interview, no video, just ringing you had a dial sheet. You had a dial sheet and you had a dial sheet of that printout paper, and then you had a black and green screen that you'd code into your orders.
Right.
And that was it. And I did it for a year, and I absolutely loved it, but I realised how hard work was. And it's such a stupid thing to say, but I was like, this is really hard, and there's a long time to do this job. And I was making a few quid off commission. I did manage to sell a few twisters every now and then. And I went to visit a mate at uni, and I was like, this is amazing. I went on a Monday night because it was, and I just had 3 amazing days there. And I was like, I need to come and do this. So I then stopped that and went off to uni and did the uni thing for sort of 4 years. Before then moving back to Liverpool. So I went up to the northeast and then moved back to Liverpool.
So at this
but that
point,
sales people was still in me. I loved it.
So, but at this point, you'd never been below Birmingham. You were a proper northerner then.
So I'd been on holiday, obviously. We would get the coach to Spain. I mean, like, people must think that's wild, but we get the coach to Spain. And then I followed Liverpool all over the world. So I would go.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's been a nice couple of weeks.
It's been a great, I did say to your man Sammy on the way in, you're lucky I'm sober today. Celebrations have gone on long and hard.
Well deserved, mate. Well deserved.
So so I'd been all over the country, but with Liverpool. And, I can remember that when I first started to come to London, jumping around a little bit, because, seeing the country through the eyes of football is not seeing the country. You see it in a very rivalry driven way on either your train or your bus or whatever it might be. So I was well travelled. Also, my dad was a bit of a wheeler dealer here, there, and everywhere, and I would go with him. We'd tie it in with going the match or just in general. And he was, he was probably a cross between sort of Del Boy and Tony Soprano, to be honest. He was like a proper personality in that sense, and therefore I had seen the country, but only through those eyes. When I went to uni, that was really eye-opening, because I moved into a house with 5 other lads, and it was the making of me, really, in terms of just seeing people from different parts of the country.
Got it.
And I loved it. I love Liverpool, but we're an inward-looking city, historically, back then especially. And I sort of flourished with seeing what was possible.
Outside the big wide world.
And I've always been super competitive. And I was really sort of a bit uncomfortable at uni when I first went, although no one would have guessed, because if I'm nervous, I just get bigger and louder. But inside, I was a bit intimidated by how clever everyone was, and
Were you clever?
No, I've never had very good academic sense at all. I loved school because you got to play footy 3 times a day. You got to see your mates. You got to smoke. You got to as you got older, you had all the distractions that came. I loved PE. I was good. I loved business studies. I was good with numbers, so I was okay in certain parts of maths. And bizarrely, I was good at home economics, as it was back then. I loved the kitchen. But I just did average, really, from there.
Was it like a rough local comp, or?
Yeah, I think it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, we don't know at the time.
I got 9s. I don't mind saying this. I got 9 C's at GCSE, and
that's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was that was probably one of the best performers in our school. In that sense, school it sounds funny now, but school they just wanted kids to turn up every day, because I was lucky, that, to be honest, without without having loads, I was never short. I was never short of anything. My mum ran the longest catalogue list in the world. You know, if we needed trainers,
loved it.
Out come the Freemans, and she'd be paying £2 a week forever.
Mad, wasn't it?
Absolutely just mad times. You just wouldn't do it that way now.
I remember when the Freeman's bag would arrive.
When the Freeman's catalogue arrived, honestly, I'd sit down and I'd be like, "This is amazing." And I'd just go through
the
it.
Toy section.
Oh, the toy section as a real kid. And like my mum didn't work. She stopped working when she'd had me and my sister, so she was off whilst I was at school. We were like a brown envelope family. My dad would come home on a Friday and a brown envelope would go on the side, and that was the money for the week. That was the housekeeping. That was how it was. Quite old fashioned, you know. It was the 80s. So, but we never went without, to be honest. But there was a lot of kids in our school that did. So therefore, school for them was just about getting through it. But for me, I must admit, I did well with the structure. I wasn't brave enough to bunk off or whatever. My mum would have absolutely roasted me if I had got caught doing any of that. And I just wanted to go and be involved in it. But college was okay. College is about like starting to find yourself, isn't it? And you start to drive and you start to have a pint, and it all just starts to get different. When you go to uni and you move away, I loved it. However, I don't like to talk about regrets, and I don't have many, but I do regret that I didn't enjoy and embrace the academic side more. I went and did sport, which was a complete cop-out. But really I went because you just got to play more sport. And then halfway through that, I decided I didn't want to do physio. I didn't really like the physiological side, bizarrely. And I really fell in love with the social side of sport and the impact it has on our life. So I sort of split my degree then in the second half to be more sociologically driven in terms of the impact of sport on society. And I just started to read a lot more, and I got really interested in it, and I started to write a lot more. And like, I get a lot of feedback now about my LinkedIn posts. My LinkedIn posts are long. I write in sentences and paragraphs, which I know is like not what you're meant to do. And I think a lot of it comes from there, because then, going back to your original question, are you academic? No, but when I got really passionate about it, and then what I realised is, when I get interested about something, then you're
all in.
Yeah, then I'm all in, and I love. And I'm curious. I love to know about things that happen, and you know, I love history, and I do like politics and that type of stuff. But bizarrely, you don't really learn any of that at school. You learn what they need to teach you to pass the exams. So I've done more learning, I would say, post education than I did in education. And my only regret with that is the university bit, because I think if I'd have picked my degree better and been a better student.
So even at this point in your life, no big grand vision, no obvious plan. You're not you haven't maybe worked out what are you thinking post university life? You said you went back to Liverpool, then what?
Well, at that point, I did really want to work in sport, but I'd got interested in like the impact of sport on society and the community. So I wanted to work in a sport in the community job, which was being pushed by the government at the time to sort of get us all more active and this, that and the other. However, I wanted money. I went back to Liverpool and I went back to my mum's for a maximum of 6 months. I'd been living obviously away for 4 years, and I wanted my own flat and my own space or whatever. So I did have dreams of going into sport, but to be honest, I needed to earn. And back then, you know, it was good jobs were in banks. You know, we didn't hate the banks back then. You know, this is 2003, 4. We didn't hate banks then. They were a good place to start your career.
That was where everybody wanted to work.
Yeah, because it was stable.
Yeah.
They never had financial problems. You were trained well. Yeah. They normally treated their staff well. And there was a big bank near us. To be honest, I was cut into. I wanted to work in sport, but I knew it wasn't going to be big money.
Right.
And I did want money. I wanted to have nice things. I didn't want to live in Liverpool forever.
Yeah.
Not in the part where I was. I wanted to move. So I went to the bank, and that's where I started. And it was there. I went in via sort of the customer services route.
Right.
Because I was good on the phone and they were hiring, but I went in because essentially it was a route in. Once you were in the bank, it was like it was the cooperative. The cooperative bank was a brilliant organisation. They had sites across Liverpool, Lancashire, Manchester, and essentially once you were in, I had a mate whose mum got me an interview, and they actually they were about to turn me down. They were like, "You're too qualified for this, and you're going to leave and do something else." And I'm like, "I'm not, as long as there's opportunity for me here." And there was, and I went in and I did 6 months just on the phone in customer services.
Right.
I never forget one Sunday night I was working overtime and my university lecturer rang and he came through on the phone and I knew it was him, and you weren't meant to acknowledge if you knew someone. And let's say his name was Andy, and I was like, Andy, it's Simon Brown. And he was moving some money around, and he obviously must have been a bit embarrassed that I was in his bank account, but I didn't really care about that. I was just happy to talk to him, and he said to me, he said it like this, he was like, so this is what you do now?
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm grafting here, and I'm trying to save. I was moving out. I did move out on 5 months, which I was happy about, but it did play on my mind, that comment. And then I started looking straight away for new opportunities. And one of those opportunities took me into the internal recruitment team inside the bank.
Right. And that's how the journey began.
Yeah. And I went there and I had a woman, called Lynn Spofford, who...
Shout out Lynn.
Lynn, honestly. Lynn, and there was a woman before her called Jill Smith who ran the mentoring team. We can't tag Jill on LinkedIn. It's not her game.
Right,
but Lynn's on,
Lynn.
so we can tag her. And those two women got me on the straight and narrow. Jill whipped me into shape, no one's business. And she also showed me about leadership, not management. We used to have a roof garden. She'd take you up the roof garden so she could have a cigarette, and then she would get into exactly what was going on in your world. What do you need? How do I develop you? How can I get more from you? And it was brilliant. And then Lynn was just helped me unearth my ambition and my drive, and I loved it. These 4 women and me, and they looked after me like either they were my sisters or my mum, and I got to travel at the time. So every time I went from Liverpool to either to Stockport or Manchester, you get the time back in lieu.
Yeah.
It was just a really good place to work. And then Reed and Hayes were both on my PSL, and we came up with an idea to run assessment centres, because we were doing it was hard, it was long interviews, competency based, and we weren't getting the volume of offers out. It was a really, really good recruitment process, if I'm being honest. Probably one for another day, but it was a great recruitment process for the candidate and the recruiter. And anyway, we came up with this idea for assessment centres, and that allowed us to do 9 offers per person per day, because we just would literally farm them through, and it was brilliant. And as doing that, I got to meet the agencies more and more, because until that point, agencies were just sending me people.
Yeah.
And I got to meet them, and Hayes and Reed, and then I had a friend who was at Reed, and they both said to me, you'd be better on this side of the table. Have you ever considered it? And I remember saying, why would I move from here? I got £200 a year Christmas bonus. Right. And I got a half-day shopping day, and I was having the time of my life.
Yeah, yeah. And sounds like you had a good boss.
Lynn was brilliant.
Yeah.
I was inspired by her and mildly intimidated, which was perfect.
That's a great combination.
It was a great combination. And honestly, it's very, very Wolf of Wall Street-esque. But one of the consultants at Reed showed me their commission check. And and at this point I was renting my flat. And I wanted to buy a house, and I was like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. And so I went and applied to both, went on an assessment day for both, picked Reed, and I moved across. And I walked in the first day to Liverpool Accountancy Reed. Guy called Phil Williams hired me. Phil's not in the game anymore. But there was a woman in that office called Lindsay Tunstall, who is still in the game and is brilliant, still at Reed. A woman called Leslie Kemp, who absolutely made me on the perm desk. But I walked in on day one, and I went into a meeting with Phil, and he said, before we start, have you got any questions? And I swear to God, I said, yeah, what is it that you do here? And he was like, you finished top of the assessment centre. I didn't know how. I'd just sort of gone down there, gone to London, and I was like, I just got no idea. And I actually said to him, why would anyone use a recruiter? Like, I've got no idea. I thought you found your job in the paper on a Thursday.
And that was the thing, though. This was before the internet, really. So I remember looking for a job, and somebody said to me, have you ever thought about working in recruitment? I was like, this sounds a bit derogatory, right? But I thought of Blue Arrow, Brook Street, High Street, shop, normally middle-aged women.
Yeah.
I was 22. But that was my understanding of what recruitment was, because they didn't have all of this information that you have now.
Yeah.
So I totally understand how you clueless, basically.
Yeah, but what I would say is I've never liked that I've never said I fell into it. I chose to take that job. I had a good job that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I chose to take it for 2 reasons. One, financially, they showed me the earning potential, and they didn't used to say back then you can earn 100 grand in the first year. If someone had said to me then you'll earn 100 grand at any point in your life, I would have never believed them. Because where I had grown up and even going to uni, I'd never met anyone who had earned anything like that. So one, I wouldn't have believed them. And two, the second bit was, what they said to me was, recruitment sits at the heart of every business. And to be honest, Reed were brilliant. They were like, recruitment sits at the heart of everything. So therefore, you'll get to look inside businesses. I'd always been interested in business and how it works and what have you. So I chose to do it. What I realised is, I did like it. However, I did find the candidate quite difficult, if I'm being honest. I didn't understand. As someone I was raised quite strict, which I'm glad. And it gave me process and structure. And what I didn't understand people who wouldn't do as they were told. So the client generally did. Once you got to know a client, and they did have a good way of training you at Reed, that it wasn't just smash and grab, it wasn't spec, it was, the formative years of using data, and it was about understanding pain points and, what have you. So once you got to know the client, and I would always go and see my clients face to face, so you get that buy-in, they would generally do what you wanted them to do. The candidate, I would say, and this was back in the day where you turned up and you wore suits, and I was doing part qualified accountants, so you would be suit driven, and you'd say, like, I'm going to send you this information, read this information, do you know what to wear, do you know where you're going, do you know what time to get there? And I didn't understand that. I'd speak to you on the phone and you'd say, like, yeah, I get it all and what have you, and then the next day, the client would ring me and say, what the fuck have you sent me here?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? And they're like, Andy's turned up and he's like not got a shoe on and he's missing a tie and he knows nothing about the company.
Yeah.
And I just didn't understand it. And then I didn't understand people who wouldn't take the offer that you put to them. And what I would say is, Reed didn't do a lot back then on counter offer training, and I wasn't pre-closing my candidates enough.
Right.
And back then, what I would say is all the process training, which was really good, was about the front end.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about the back end.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand why. But I've got you a purchase ledger clerk job, paying 22 grand a year.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Your boss has offered you something else? Hang on, but you've like,
just told me you wanted a job. I got you a job. What's the problem?
Yeah. And in some cases, they'd sign the paperwork or whatever, and I'd be like, what are you talking about?
Do you know what? I think for me, that was... Nothing makes you more cynical than being a recruiter, because you are exposed to this broad spectrum of people who find it easier to say yes, and then because outside, and then they'll dupe you later on, rather than just have the courage to go, actually, this is not right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why you become cynical as a recruiter.
Yeah, and I've never dealt with people who didn't just say what they think.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you brought up in a Liverpool council estate, the one thing you would assume is that people are pretty direct.
Yeah.
So how long were you at Reed for in total?
Just under 5 years.
It's a good stretch.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. And to be honest, I only stayed from there. I got moved into it. So through the restructure, I did really good, but you had to move into it. Everyone had to fee earn at that point then, the halcyon days of having account managers rolling around where like company car and all that.
It was end of days stuff in 2000. People like the world's going,
Perm just turned off, right? So from there, so I moved into a business development manager's job, and then we went from a team of 32 down to 16, and essentially it was like, right, here's your network, but I'd been working on PSLs and managed service at that point, so I knew how to strategic sell more than just placements. And I got given a public sector framework, which was for the police forces, and it was good for me because there's 43 police forces in the UK. At that point, Reed had 8, and they were like, Adecco had most of the other ones. And they were like, essentially, it's sales, but within a defined area. But you've got to sell managed service, and I just got my teeth into it. And within 2 years, not all on my own. There was like an amazing network of people there, but I was the spearhead of the sales side of it. And within 2 years, we had 27 accounts.
Wow. Police forces.
Yeah. The biggest account we won, which was a team, was the Met Police, which James Reed really wanted because they liked iconic brands. But to be honest, I was just part of a team for that. The other 25, I spearheaded the sales on, and those 25 did 22 million a year in NFI, and it was just massive numbers. And it was like such an exposure to like how to sell big accounts, client relations, procurement processes, temp inside down and upside down.
That's really interesting, because do you think that let's call it an apprenticeship, early part of your career, selling solutions early on, selling MSP or outsourcing, whatever you want to call it, that's a great foundation to move into professional staffing later on, right? Which is knowing the difference between a placement and a project or a program, because there's worlds apart, right? Spot business, lots of people can kick a door down and do a deal.
Yeah.
Not everyone can turn that opportunity into something meaningful, recurring, repeatable.
Yeah, and what I didn't like, so I was good at knocking a door down because I wasn't scared to get on the phone and I wasn't scared to get out and see people. However, I didn't like the smash and grab nature of the branch life, in perm in particular, and I probably wasn't a natural farmer. And also I was doing part qual accountancy. They don't, unless you're a really big business, you don't have 10 or 20 purchase ledger clerks. You don't have 20 accounts assistants. So it did drive you that way. When I moved into strategic accounts, which is what it was called, it was about longer term revenue, repeat revenue. And like I took Coca-Cola at 22 grand or something like that a month.
Right.
And I got it to 50 grand a month. And I saw the ability to grow and scale and build that way. So yeah, I was lucky because I put myself out there, and at this point I still lived in Liverpool, and I was only at home 1 day a week. I was away 4 days a week.
Still in Liverpool?
Yeah.
So you were probably 30 at this point?
So I left Reed when I left Reed and moved to London when I was 30. So I did all of this between 25 and 30. Yeah.
And then what was the decision to leave Reed? What was the trigger?
Well, two things happened. Firstly, I was getting frustrated. I felt like we did sell via a process, and I was starting to get a bit itchy by the process. There had been a lot of change post 2008. Every business has had to restructure a lot, but there was a lot of chopping and changing, which is not their fault, and I do understand, but I was getting a bit naffed off. Anyway, I went to bid for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office one day. It was worth £6 million a year. I can remember it clear as day. And they'd qualified to come under our framework. It was a 3-year deal. And I took the team and we went down to Whitehall and we went into this underground bunker and we pitched and presented. And I used to lead the pitch. And then I'd have like the local branch manager, I'd have an implementation manager, and they would be like the team on the day. And I was working on I was no word of a lie, I was working on a laptop that had been handed down from God.
Right.
And it said on the back of it, Reed Executive, which was quite an old brand at the time. And and I'd been saying for a while, this laptop is like really, really hard work and I need to change it and what have you. Anyway, you can't make this up. I was clicking through the slides and Reed had a brilliant tech stack that they used to offer their client base. And I said the words, and now we're going to look at the tech stack. And I pressed enter to go on to the next slide, and the laptop just shut down and never came back on. Now I was working with a brilliant project and implementation manager called Helen Hutchinson, and she said she'd brought handouts. So we did the rest of the presentation via handout, and we didn't win it, and Hayes won it. And I asked for feedback, and they gave us generic feedback, and I rang the procurement head, and I was like, why? And she was like, how can we trust your technology stack when your actual technology didn't work? And I went to my director, and they were like, send it in and we'll get it serviced for you. And I was like, are you kidding me? I need a new laptop. And then I went to the pub on the Thursday like you used to, and I was speaking to a practice director, and he said to me, go home, fill the bath full of water, drop the laptop in the water and tell them it's got water damage and they'll replace it. And I just didn't understand that world. And to be honest, there could be another side to that story that I don't understand, but that really triggered me to be like, oh, I've just had enough. So I resigned, and I also then decided to rent out my house in the May of that year, and my commitment was I'll be in London by the August.
Right.
So I went to interview at a couple of places, and one of them was Morgan Hunt, where my old director, a woman called Michelle Smith, who's now back at Reed, absolutely brilliant. She'd gone there, and they had a very, very small bid BD function.
Right.
And she was like, we really would love to build a proper BD function. They were a cracking, growing outfit.
Right.
And so I went there.
And that was your first job in London?
Yeah.
So that was Morgan Hunt.
Yeah.
So where did your career go from there?
So there, I I then became the head of BD, function of one. And I was like, I don't think clients like the name or term business development. So I came up with an idea to create a client services department. We'd had a change of MD, a new MD, which she moved from another area of the business called Sue Cooper, who, again, a brilliant woman for my career. And essentially, she backed all of my ideas and potential. And I said, I want to build a client services division, which essentially, we had like 150 door kickers who were brilliant. And then we had probably another 50 or so who were good at nurturing stuff, but we didn't have a central department for it all to live in. So I created a client services function from there. And that saw us own strategic sales and then strategic growth. So either we were growing PSLs into MSPs because it was heavily temp, or we were taking perms, ones and twos, and we were selling perm projects and our own version of RPO, I would say at the time. Yeah. And Sue developed me along the way. And then by the time I was maybe 32 or 33, they offered me to join the board as commercial director.
Was that your first taste of business operations?
Yeah, it was. And it was also, you know, I was a divisional director before I went on to be a company's house commercial director. And my favourite job was probably divisional director, if I'm being honest. I was like the director of client services. I had about 20 people in my world. It was Manchester, Birmingham and London. And I loved it. And I reported into Sue, but I didn't get to go in the boardroom. And then she took me out one day and she said the owner was called Rupert, and she was like, Rupert's going to ask you to join the board tomorrow. And I actually said, I don't think he should. And she was like, I need to know that if he does, you're going to accept it, because, you know, we can't go in that room and turn it down. It'll just look really bad. And also, why do you think that? And I just said, I didn't think I was ready. However, in a bigger business, and by then we were north of 250 staff, in a bigger business, there's always a room that you're not in, and decisions are made in the room that you're not in, you know, and the board meeting was where I thought all the decisions were made. So I actually thought about it long and hard that night, and then he offered me the next day. And what I also must admit is when he offered me the role and he said, please join the board and become one of our directors and come onto Company's House, I was just like so blown away and proud. I was like, how can I not do this? And I must admit that the MD who we had before Sue, he said to me, your BD person will never make it to the board. You know, you've got to run a sales function. And I must admit, I was like super proud to make it in. But I wouldn't have done if Sue hadn't shown me the way, being honest.
Interesting pattern, like the sort of female leadership throughout your career.
Yeah, honestly, I think that when I worked for...
that's connected to the sort of matriarch, Liverpool. You know what I mean?
Strong women.
Yeah, strong women,
strong
mate,
women, And I think I like the diversity of thought of different people, different ideas. Like, I'm a battering ram at times, and I'm a ball of energy and ideas. I can bounce around a lot. I definitely could back then. You know, I was really good for Sue. We'd go into senior leadership meetings before the board meeting, and I know that I would be her pain in the arse in that meeting.
Yeah, because
defend my pattern.
Because you're a big, physically big guy.
Thank you.
You're a big unit. Mm-hmm. You've got a big personality. And you've got a big Scouse accent. Right. So that's a. Did you find that sometimes that held you back? Did you have to sort of soften it up a bit?
Yeah, and that's why my accent now sounds like it does now.
Well, I've got no frame of reference, right?
But
your schoolmates probably like, he's gone soft.
Oh yeah, like when I go back for the match or to see friends or whatever, you know, I hate it when someone says to me, where are you from? You know, I know then, I just sound like, you know, I've been presenting Granada reports, and if you live in the Northwest, you know what that means, that generic bastardized Northern accent. But someone said to me at Reed, I was stood outside a pub just off Covent Garden, the Nelgwyn, on a cracking little pub.
I know it,
And I was stood off there, and someone said to me one night, it was an Australian woman, and she said, you're really hard, you speak really quick, and it's really hard to understand what you say, but you actually say really sensible things. That accent's going to hold you back. Now, people would listen to that now and be offended. Oh, you should have been offended. How could you say that or whatever? But she was giving me advice. Now, at the time, my sort of chip was quite big on my shoulders, so I probably thought, fuck you. But it was good advice because it was holding me back. And I think you've got to make a decision. I wanted to do well, and I wanted to climb the ladder, and I wanted to progress. So I didn't want to lose my passion. and I didn't want to lose my energy and my drive, but I did start to tone it down a little bit. I was never aggressive in my opinion, but I have been, because I have my hair short and I've got quite an intense look on my face, I have been told it can look quite intimidating. Now, to me, it doesn't.
Yeah, of course.
But I can understand why people think that. So I think it has held me back. But I think once people get to know me, they then find out all that intensity and energy is drive and passion and ambition and desire. I like work and I want to do well and I want to climb and climb and climb. And I'm like Marmite, you either love that or you hate that. And Morgan Hunt was then in particular a brilliant breeding ground for young, raw, I wasn't that young then. I felt really old. I went there at 30 and they all went there in their 20s.
Yeah.
And that was good for me because again, they used to hire real like red brick type grads and what have you. So everyone there definitely was cleverer than me. But what I realized was if you worked hard, I could outwork anyone.
Yeah.
So I just did. And then they really fostered that environment of work hard, play hard, go to, classic things, the pub every Friday, the shared hangover on a Friday. Sorry, the pub on a Thursday, the shared hangover on a Friday.
But at your desk.
Yeah.
Never, you could always do anything, but you never late on a Friday with a hangover.
Yeah. To be honest, late on a Friday was quite funny because you just got tore apart. We used to call it the aisle. You walk down the aisle. We used to call it the legs, the left leg and the right leg. The right leg was the sales floor and it was like desks either side and you'd walk down this aisle and if you were late, obviously you'd just get like abused for being late. Yeah. If you no-showed, it was just unheard of. And it was like, and also you sort of didn't want to no-show because you wanted to hear what was going on. And then also you turn up with your bacon butty and your coffee and you'd be like, I'm never ever doing this again. And at 4 o'clock someone would say, should we go for a pub? Should we go for a pint?
Yeah.
And you'd go again. And then you'd just sleep it off Saturday, Sunday. Yeah,
amazing. So why wait to 40 to scratch an entrepreneurial itch? Had you ever thought about it previously?
No.
What do you think changed in your life that made you went, I'm going to start my own thing? Was it financial security? Was it,
No, I was paid better then.
Yeah, exactly.
I was paid better then. I think what happened is, so when I went to Morgan Hunt, they embraced what they called this entrepreneurial spirit, but I didn't really understand what that meant. I just felt it meant selling creatively. I always said I never wanted to run my own recruitment agency. My ambition was to run a recruitment agency and to run someone else's. My ambition was to be an MD and what have you. And then when I went to Cooper Lomas, the two negatives I would say there was I was running someone else's business as an owner. But I was very, very well paid and remunerated, but I wasn't remunerated like an owner. So I did start to think, I want a piece of that EBITDA action. I wasn't remunerated in that way. I was paid well. So one, when you start to think about the money in that sense, you start to view it differently. And then two, I was running someone else's business and I then started to think, well, if you can run someone else's...
You can run your own.
Yeah, but I wanted to MBO. I did not think I could start from scratch.
From zero,
I didn't. And then, so that's why I took the DG job because my plan was I'll just become their MD.
Yeah.
And
then maybe MBO.
And then maybe MBO that in the future.
Yeah.
Then my hand was sort of forced and then I just thought I was just sick and tired of seeing decisions that I didn't agree with. So it probably then became a control element and I did have the finances to do it. I didn't want to start a one-man band.
Yeah.
I could start with 5 people. I had a really clear plan and we sort of just got after it really.
Amazing. And that brings us nicely to Richard Knows Best, which is a journey that I've been following, I think, from close to the beginning.
Yeah.
I guess for my benefit and the listeners, if I met you at a barbecue and I said, what do you do?
Yeah.
Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. How would you describe it?
Well, I'd still say I work in recruitment.
Yeah.
And my wife will say sometimes, you should say you run a business and you own your own business, but I still feel like a recruiter inside. There's a bit in between running Digital 51 and then selling Digital 51 and a really bad experience within there that made me realise how bad other businesses were being run and led. And I sold Digital 51 and then bought it back. And then I was faced with the decision, which was I can rebuild this again. But by this time I'd done 3 or 4 turnarounds and I just didn't have it in me to grow again. So I thought I just kept it small.
Yeah.
And then I just started to get approached by people to say, and I'm conscious that we are at the barbecue, but I just got approached by people saying, can you show us how you did this? And can you show us how I did that? And I just started to do some consultancy alongside Digital 51. And then I just looked across our industry, and what I thought is we've got loads of service providers. We've got loads of service providers, marketing agencies, BD people, training people,
software.
Tech people, software. But then if you look at other industries, they have a consultancy arm that sits in the middle, which is about sales and growth enablement, strategy. And what I think, I love our industry, but we're bad at long-term planning. You know, a quarter feels like a lifetime for us. And I just had learned over my career that if you have a 12-month plan and it's not just we need to make this amount of money and you drive towards that strategic goal, then it can be a lot more successful. And you just need to stay in that plan for a year. You pivot along the way, but you stick to the premise of we want to achieve these goals. So if we're meeting at a barbecue, I would say that Richard Knows Best, get your own company's name right, is the first and only strategic sales agency in the UK recruitment market.
Got it.
And what that means is you cannot work with, we will drive your marketing. I am passionate about performance marketing, and I've got an amazing marketeer called Matt. Shout out to Matt, definitely.
Shout out Matt.
Oh, absolutely.
Love the vlogs.
Yeah, the king of the vlog.
Yeah.
And I'm passionate about performance marketing. I'm passionate about people development. I'm passionate about tech stack optimization. I love process. I think it's at the heart of everything we do. And we will sell you, for want of a better term, all of that. But we won't do any of it until you come through a strategic process with us and you tell us what your strategic long-term objectives are. And if you can't work out what they are, we will help you do that. So you can't come to us and say, we want Richard Knows Best to help us get better at BD. Or to get better at sales, or to optimize our tech stack. What you can do is say to us, in 12 months' time, I would like my business to generate more NFI, or be more profitable, or to have a more streamlined business. Or I don't know what's happening inside my business and I want longer term goals. Can you help me assess what they are? And we only have one product. Everything else is bespoke. We have one product called the Tactical Review Day. This is a definite plug. It's 699 quid. And we come into your business for one day. If you sub 10 heads, for every 10 heads over that, just add a day on. And we come inside your business for a day. We don't stand there with a clipboard. We get into your sales meetings. We get into your desks. We get into your, ops function, marketing function, and we strip it right back. And then we present you a 12-month plan to say, this is how you can move your business forwards. And that plan is yours to keep. We sit with the owners and we say, where do you want to be in 12 months' time? Even if they can't explain the objectives, just tell us where you want to be. And then we tie those objectives to a 12-month plan. And that's yours. And you can either go and give that to someone else, you can do it yourself, or if you turn the page over, it will say, this is how we would support you on that journey for the next 12 months.
Right. Amazing. And so what, if I'm a recruitment company owner or CEO today, I've got 10 heads. What kind of emotions might I be feeling that might be the precursor to give you a call?
Do you know, one, that job is harder than anyone gives it credit for. You know yourself, running and leading any business is hard. Running and leading your own recruitment business. I am one of the only people I know that have set a business up at this later point in life. So I'd learned to run a business before I started a business. Most recruiters come off a desk.
I know I did.
And you know, I'll never forget Farouk from DG said to me, the first thing you're going to do in 6 months' time is you're going to ring me and say, I should have done this when I was 28. And he was totally right, because I would have had the energy to do it at 28 in a whole different way. However, didn't know how to run a business. The feelings most recruitment owners in that case, in my experience, are feeling is, I don't know how to run a business. I decided to set a recruitment business up. I started trading. I went after clients. I might have had some great ideas and I might have brought some people with me. And before I know it, I'm making money and I'm losing money and I'm hiring people and I'm losing people. But it's a business entity that I'd never really planned for. So they're feeling that, you can feel it in your gut as an owner, which
it's like an anxiety.
It's anxiety all the time. And you're like shitting yourself thinking, I don't really know what I'm doing. But how can you say you don't know what you're doing when you're the owner? So they're feeling versions of that. Or they're feeling, which is where the name comes from. The name Richard comes from essentially, the play on the word Richard is the word dick, right? If your name's Richard, you're also known as Dick. And there's a dick inside every agency that thinks that he or she knows how to run your agency better than you. And the other feeling that an owner can feel sometimes, which is, I'm not really running the agency that I want to run. I'm running an agency that my people want to run, because I don't want to lose those people, because if I lose those people, I lose the
billing,
the NFI. So they're just feeling uncertainty, and hopefully they're feeling, I'm fed up of seeing people on LinkedIn shout at me, telling me how they could run my business better than me. I want to speak to someone who, first of all, has walked my walk. And bearing in mind, I still own Digital 51 today. We still, it's three people, it's tiny. I'm one of those 3 people, I should be clear. And we will do and continue to do recruitment projects on a really small scale now, but I will grow that back up in the future, because I always want to still feel what that owner is feeling. My passion and desire right now is to grow Richard Knows Best. However, I want the owner to think, I want to sit opposite someone who has been in this exact position and just has the scar tissue and experience to show me the way out. From there.
And for these people that you meet today, are there themes and trends that you spot where founders, CEOs, are experiencing that might give some comfort to others that might be feeling the same things?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, my real passion is the sub 50 head agency. And let's be honest, our industry is based on sub 20 head agencies anyway. And the reason being, sub 50s, they're always privately owned. So you're dealing with the owners who is the leader in some way, shape or form. And what I thought is, when we started, I thought it would all be about BD. That's the pinch point in the market right now in that sense. And it's really not. It is truly about strategic goal setting. The amount of companies that they just haven't, the only 12-month commitment is an NFI or a GP number. And if they're an owner, they've probably got an EBITDA number in their mind as well, or a dividend amount. I met an owner, and she ran a bigger business. And she said to me, we were chatting in the bar after the expo, and she said to me, she was great, and I loved her, she was really fierce, and she said to me, but I wouldn't need you guys, I'm doing £1 million a year EBITDA. I was like, that's great. I said, is that the most amount of EBITDA available on earth? And she was like, no. And I said, well, therefore you do need help and advice and guidance, don't you? I also said to her, to do that £1 million, do you keep your team every year, or have you got a high turnover of staff? And she went, oh no, we're turning people over for fun, left, right and centre. And I'm like, you do need support and advice. Maybe I might not be the right person for you. But even if your definition of success is that, where's the long-term nature of that? If you don't look after that business, where's it going to be in 12, 24 months time? It'll just decline, in my experience. So the themes generally are around longer term planning and focus. But right now, it's also the complicated nature of our industry, in the sense of all of the tech plugins and the automation and the opportunity that it represents, and how it's made things really, really, a really simplistic industry which didn't embrace tech for years, has completely swallowed the tech and automation pill, and it's made a really simple process really complicated. And most businesses we're working with right now have got 2 objectives. 1, how do we long-term plan and have strategic goals? And 2, how do we make our entire operating function more efficient?
Sounds incredible. On that note, what an experience. It's been great to sit with you today. Thank you so much for coming in, sharing your story. And hopefully we'll do it again sometime, and we'll have you back on in a year when you can share your thoughts then.
I'd love to. And you thought we might not fill an hour.
I know, mate. Exactly. Imagine that, we could be here all day.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks.
Cheers, Andy. Thank you.